This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. This episode is brought to you by BNC Pro, the brand spanking new digital wealth platform featuring an all-in-one suite of customizable institutional grade applications that help you manage your crypto investments. Yes, research, chart, screen, analyze, optimize, report, and more. BNC Pro is the ultimate portfolio tool for individual or enterprise use. Streamline your workflow, manage your crypto, and master this brave new asset class your way with BNC Pro. Go to bnc-pro.com now to create your free account, or just look for the link in the show notes to this episode. Now, on with the show. My guest today is Stephen Stonberg. Stephen is the COO and CFO at Bittrex Global, a digital asset exchange in Liechtenstein in Europe. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here today.
Well, let's just get a little bit of background on yourself, Stephen, before we dig into Bittrex Global. So my understanding is you're an American, you graduated from Harvard, you spent time at Goldman Sachs, and of course you found your way into blockchain. So yeah, you're another one of these guys that I guess comes from the traditional finance world. What was your pathway into the wonderful world of digital assets?
So before Goldman, I worked in a couple of other banks and hedge funds, and I spent a lot of time working in London for about 14 years. So I actually have a British passport as well. So I spent a lot of time in sort of global finance. And when I saw crypto during the bubble, during 2017, really became interested in the asset class. And I thought it had a lot of parallels to what is the financial services industry from my perspective. But I think it had a lot of parallels to what I would say the financial services world looked like in the 80s, when it was still an interesting place, not a lot of players, huge margins, and it was a really new industry. And it was totally decentralized, global, so it was hugely interesting. Did a steep learning curve, got up to speed on it, started talking to a lot of different, exchanges, because I think at the time, 2 years ago, and even now, I still think this is an interesting way, especially for somebody with a financial services background, to get involved in the business. I actually did my first foray I did a brief stint at Binance, and then that was my first foray into crypto, sort of working full time, and then moved over to Bittrex about a year and a half ago and haven't looked back.
Fantastic. So what were you doing at Binance?
Business development. The company was very small. There were only about 90 employees, so it was very early days. So, it's changed dramatically since I left, and I couldn't possibly comment on what's going on over there.
Of course. So Bittrex Global is based in Liechtenstein, which is in Europe. And I think it would be good if maybe you just set out the background here as to the difference between Bittrex based in the US and then Bittrex Global, perhaps the relationship between the two, if there is one, and how that works.
Sure. So, Bittrex, as you know, is one of the oldest, most secure exchanges. It's been around, many more years than some of the newer firms like Binance and some of the others. And traditionally, the entire business was run out of the US, including, all of the customer business. And about 2 years back, there was a decision made to break the business in two and keep the sort of US customers booked out of the US through, I guess, let's call it the US exchange, but then to have the non-US customers not have to trade through the US. So first step was setting up a company called Bittrex International it was in Malta. And, we ran all of the business out of there. And then as we decided to really focus more and more, and the whole idea is to be regulated, and the regulation outside of the US is in some ways more clear and easier to comply with if you want to do, especially altcoins and some of the more interesting blockchain projects we're working on. We made a decision to move the business to Liechtenstein. Malta was fine, but we thought that the Blockchain Act that was passed in Liechtenstein, and it went into law in January this year, really just was a very good piece of legislation. Liechtenstein itself is a AAA rated jurisdiction. It's not an EU member state, but it's in the EEA, so it's similar to Iceland or Norway. So the banks in Liechtenstein have full EU passporting if you have like a regulated financial institution. So it's under sort of EU regulations, but it's so you have the best of both worlds, but they don't have the EU level of taxation, shall we say. So it's a very favorable jurisdiction, and unlike Malta, it's not an island, so you can actually drive there in about an hour from the airport, which is in Zurich. And you're connected to the whole crypto valley region of Zurich, Zug, and you're a 2-hour drive from Munich. I think the other thing about Liechtenstein, unlike Malta, Liechtenstein is a financial services jurisdiction. So it's very well known to all the banks and the large institutional players. Malta is not. It's more known for gaming and some other industries. So I think to the extent that we're running a financial services business, we thought that was a great fit. We moved the business there in September, and basically all of the clients, we rebranded the business as Bittrex Global. And so now if you're a client of the Bittrex exchange outside of the US, you are trading with a Liechtenstein entity. And right now we're in the process of registering the company under the Blockchain Act. So once that process is complete, then we'll be fully licensed under an EU bank regulator, but I don't want to be, we have to be very careful with the language that we use around how we're supervised by the FMA. So we are in the process of applying. We will have that hopefully in a month or two.
Of course. Well, Stephen, was that must have been a little bit of a challenge, though, over the last year or two. So, from going from being Bittrex US, which, as you said, was one of the older, longer standing and best well-known crypto exchanges, especially in the early days. But then when you had this, let's say, uncertain US regulatory environment, and I guess you made the hard decision to effectively set up a new exchange for your customers or users outside of the US. And because I remember I had a Bittrex account myself, and so obviously I'm based in New Zealand outside of the US, and so I got those emails saying that, we're going to be transitioned to this other exchange. Just talk me through some of the challenges there, and how has that process gone?
Well, I'd say that, it was definitely challenging, and then we moved from one jurisdiction to another. But as you know, we're trying to, it's a very crazy world in crypto in terms of regulation. It's constantly changing, and we're always trying to look for the best practices and best jurisdictions. So even though we knew it would create more work and more pain for all of our listing teams as well, and we had over 200 projects listed, we had to make every team get a Liechtenstein legal opinion, having just asked them to get Malta legal opinions a year before that. So we weren't exactly super popular with all of the listing teams, but I think and also our clients, who we were then asking to then sign another term of service. So we tried to make it as seamless and painless as possible. In fact, we actually moved our server fully offshore, which it wasn't under. I don't think it was fully offshore yet under Malta, but now everything is fully offshore. So that actually was seamless. So we were really pleased with some of the tech integration and how smoothly it went. There was almost no disruption on the exchange, but there was definitely a bit of administrative hassle we would have liked to not have to burden our customers and listing teams with, but in the long run, it was the right thing to do, and I don't think I think everyone's extremely happy with our decision.
Yes, I think it would have been some long days and long nights for your various due diligence teams during that process.
We had a lot, myself included. We moved some staff over, and it was definitely, even though it's an established company, it was in some ways a bit startup-y in terms of just getting the office set up in Liechtenstein and just all the sorts of things of setting up a new entity, even if you're in an established company. But we're smoothly running now, and we're growing, and it's all very exciting.
Just to look forward then, and perhaps, do you see a pathway forward to perhaps try and tie up some of these messy regulatory issues that exist across the different jurisdictions?
Well, so I think for our standpoint, we've bifurcated into two. We have a U.S. exchange, which is fully regulated in the U.S., and if you're a U.S. passport holder, or a U.S. resident, you have to do business there. And I don't want to comment on U.S. regulation, but I would say that clearly there's more clarity outside of the U.S., especially in the EU, about what's a utility token. And the European regulators have been much more, I think, progressive in that front. And in general, and then Liechtenstein particularly passing an actual blockchain act, so it's codified in law. Yes. So we found that that's why we decided to headquarter our our sort of global business outside of the U.S. is there. So everything is just conducted under Liechtenstein law.
Talk me through who the Bittrex Global target customer profile for Bittrex Global then.
I'd say it's the same target customer that we've always had. And I'd say in general, so nothing's really changed. I think what differentiates perhaps our customers versus some of the other exchanges, I think, in general, we have a reputation for having a lot of altcoins and a lot of different functionalities. So I think if you're looking for that, you already have you've self-selected into a smaller list of exchanges because, not all of them, like Coinbase, which is a great exchange, they're really focused on fiat on-ramps and not having a lot of tokens. So if you want altcoins, you're not going to go there. Whereas then I think within the world of choices for altcoin providers, then I think if you're looking for regulation and security as well, then we're probably the right home for you. If that's not a focus for you, then there's plenty of other choices.
That's right, and because I think there obviously are so many exchanges out there, particularly in the world of altcoins. But if you are interested in altcoin trading and you want to do so in, let's say, a safer, more regulated environment, then Bittrex Global outside the US would be a good choice then. That's what you're saying?
Absolutely. I mean, again, we are fully, the whole exchange is under the supervision of a regulator, and that's only going to get more strong as we finish our application. So I can't comment on competitors, but I don't think that, places like the Cayman Islands and the Seychelles, I don't think they're regulated at all. And even if they were, there's a reason people bank in places like Liechtenstein and Switzerland and not in these other jurisdictions. So
that is very much correct, Stephen. But, that said, without necessarily commenting on your competitors, the exchange market is extremely competitive. So what are you doing to compete to win new customers or attract new customers to Bittrex Global?
Well, I think what's interesting, so if you look into 2017, Bittrex globally was probably one of the highest volume, biggest exchanges. And then, when we were then obviously the regulation came down hard in the US and elsewhere. We decided just to focus on doing that because it's not a choice. Like you have to. It's like a bank. Think about it from a bank or a regulated financial institution. Like regulations aren't optional. You have to get that right or you will go out of business. I mean, you wouldn't bank in a bank with no regulations as a customer. But in crypto, people don't seem to understand that, and they don't understand the risks involved in that. So I'd say like a lot of our unregulated competitors, who shall remain nameless, have obviously grown and had dramatic market share growth, but that's not sustainable. And if you violate regulations just because you haven't been caught yet or shut down yet, that doesn't mean that you won't be. So we took the time and took a break, even if it came at the cost of market share. And I think now we've got the regulatory infrastructure and the bank accounts and all the things that are hard to get are in place. Now we're adding a lot of the functionality, which, I think we probably fell a little bit behind, but we can catch up pretty quickly. We just launched Euro pairs. We'll be launching other currency pairs. We have Bank Frick right now powering our Euro pairs. We have other banks lined up. It's just a question of API integration. And again, that's one of our benefits. The banks love us because we're regulated we're in a clean jurisdiction, and a bank regulator in Europe is overlooking what we're doing. And that's not the same conversation our competitors can have. So we're going to be adding a lot of functionality. Some of it's what I would call Me Too functionality. Like we're looking to have derivatives soon. We just teased that we will be launching our own token as well. And we have some other interesting utility for that token. So a lot of really interesting things coming down the pike from us.
Yeah, well, tell me more about the Bittrex token then, because I have seen you guys tease that. So you're talking about some interesting functionality there. Is there much you can share about the token?
I'd say it's other than the functionality. So it's going to replace Bittrex credits ultimately, which Bittrex credits were just sort of a ledger entry way of doing discounts on trading. So it'll have that type of functionality. I can't really talk about some of the other utilities. We'll be talking about that soon. But, that's the basic idea of it. And, the white paper is still being put together. It's coming soon. But I think what's interesting, it won't be offered in the US, no US, any nexus at all. But again, I think we're the first of what I would call the quote unquote sort of regulated or cleaner exchanges to have a token like this. So we think that's very exciting.
Oh, very exciting. Well, I look forward to hearing more details on that. How would you characterize the wider crypto ecosystem at the moment? So do you guys still have a number of different projects knocking on your door looking for listings, or is that tapered off? What's the environment looking like at the moment?
We have a huge pipeline of listings. So we've actually really increased the number of listings that we're doing. We noticed that after the whole sort of when a certain competitor's offices were raided in Shanghai, that there was basically a lot of the Chinese exchanges stopped doing listings of Chinese projects, and we will as Chinese projects. So we've had a huge increase in interest from China and other parts of Asia, and also Europe as well, and a lot of interesting Swiss and sort of continental projects. So we have seen an increase in the number of projects coming. We're doing more listings, and we get thousands of emails in our sort of listings email. But obviously, we can only list a small percentage of quality projects.
Yes, indeed. Okay, well, the flip side of whatever is happening in the altcoin markets, of course, is Bitcoin, the original Big Daddy, #1 decentralized global digital currency. And of course, I think as we record, Stephen, we're probably around 4 days away from the next Bitcoin halving. It's the third Bitcoin halving, and you probably have seen the markets today. Bitcoin has, shown pretty bullish signs over the last week. It's hovering just under 10K at the moment, I think. I'd love to just get any thoughts from yourself on what your understanding of the market is at the moment, and any thoughts from yourself on what you see happening with the Bitcoin halving going forward.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to give sort of like an observer's comments, and they're personal comments. They're not sort of views of the company. But, I'd say there is some correlation. The markets, equity markets go up, and then Bitcoin seems to go up more. So I think it's always interesting to look and see how the stock indices are doing the same day that you see Bitcoin price move. So I look today, yes, it is up, but so equity markets are up as well. I think you're going to see a lot more volatility in equity markets. Like it's calm right now, but I think we could see another leg down in stocks. It'll be interesting to see if and when that happens, what happens to Bitcoin. But it does show the resilience of Bitcoin, the interest in Bitcoin through the halving, and I think you're going to see a lot more institutional investors seem to be interested. So, I'd say it's a positive sign. I think long term it's got a very bullish outlook, but I'm sure we'll see a lot more volatility in the short run in all asset classes, including crypto.
Yes, I think that's probably a fair comment. And did you see today, when I woke up this morning and jumped on Twitter, I saw that Paul Tudor, who is, he's a US hedge fund guy, one of the original hedge fund guys, and he came out this morning and said that he has reversed his position on Bitcoin, and that, well, he's now looking at Bitcoin as a potential hedge against inflation, and he compared Bitcoin today to gold in the 70s. So that's a one positive sign that perhaps some of the bigger institutions are starting to take notice.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's great, but I always take those comments with a grain of salt. I used to work at another large macro fund called Brevan Howard, and you never when these guys tweet they're usually talking their own book, so he's probably already long, and he's tweeting up the position. But without being a bit cynical, I think it's a great thing anyway, regardless for the industry, that people like that are now focused on it again. And I think in 2017 you saw a lot of institutional interest from the hedge funds. I think the problem is for them, they're running multi-billion-dollar funds. So to run a meaningful size position, back then the market wasn't liquid enough. I think now, there's a lot more liquidity in the market cap's bigger, and you have a lot more players. So if you can start to get that institutional money in any sort of size, it'll really have a big impact on the price.
That's right. And I think from the reports of what Paul Tudor was talking about, I think anything that he was involved with, they'd be trading Bitcoin futures as opposed to Bitcoin spot.
Yes, absolutely. that's where you also have, because you have those contracts now where you can, which didn't really exist 2 years ago. So they can get a lot more leveraged exposure through derivatives than they can through spot.
Yes, indeed. Well, just, touching base again on the wider macro economy, obviously with the global pandemic, we're in for a bumpy ride ahead. And you said that you wouldn't be surprised if you see another leg down in stocks. And, stocks have held up, you'd have to say, remarkably well so far. So, yeah, I mean, this is a little bit speculative, but any thoughts on what you expect to happen over the next 12 months in the economy or in crypto?
I'm not an economist, but I think we tend to look at history. And if you look at the Great Depression, it was the last time that we saw anything like these types of unemployment numbers. It's staggering. I think the real issue will be how quickly do things, once they start to relieve the sort of lockdowns, how quickly does the economy bounce back? And I don't think anybody has an idea. So if it bounces back to where it was, great. But it may not. So I think the market's pricing in that it will kind of just come back very quickly. But if it doesn't, and you have all this new structural unemployment, I think nobody has a good idea. And this is unprecedented in terms of the amount of money printing. I mean, this is at a much bigger quantum and scale than 2008.
Well, just before we go to a break, and then we'll come back and finish off with the crypto conversation hot take round, just finishing off on Bittrex Global, Stephen. What would you describe as the key point of difference? What should people expect, and what can you tease them with to go and check out your exchange?
Well, I think, again, I've done a lot of looking at business strategy, and if you look at a competitive landscape, and if the way I look at it is, if you look at the providers of, as I said before, of the exchanges that have a lot of altcoins, and we have well over 200, that you're not going to find many that are highly regulated in that space. And then where we've had gaps versus competitors, like fiat on-ramps, and we have credit cards, by the way, which I forgot to mention, that's already rolled out. So 170 countries can use credit cards to get onto the exchange and then buy their first Bitcoin with us, or whatever altcoins they want to get. So we have a lot of this, what I call Me Too functionality, and we will be launching our own derivatives platform shortly. It will be regulated, not out of the Seychelles, which again that's not regulation. So I think we'll continue to build out the business, and we think it'll be the best and safest place to conduct that business. And then with our token, we think that we'll be taking a leap ahead of the other, what I would call regulated exchanges. None of them really have a native token out there. And then some of the utility, which we're planning to have at launch, which is going to be very exciting, is something that no one else has, and we think we'll be really leapfrogging ahead again.
Fantastic. And look, I'm not sure how much you can share, but can you give us any insight into what you see in terms of customer growth curves on Bittrex Global and the volume traded? And
obviously you can look at the public statistics on, some of the websites. I don't know how unbiased they are now that they're owned by a competitor, but the data is out there. I think, obviously, as I said, we definitely, the numbers are out there. We sacrifice a lot of volume because we were more focused on getting the platform correct, but we've seen really encouraging signs. I mean, obviously the bull market in Bitcoin now is floating all boats. So certainly some of it is due to the market, but we've seen a lot of users coming on board due to, the new functionality through credit cards and through these new on-ramps. And we have some other interesting on-ramps coming, which I can't mention, but which will be very interesting as well. So we hope that it's not just because of the market going up, but that's great regardless. And we look to continue to grow market share. And I think as more people come into Bitcoin and into the asset class in general, into crypto, it's not a question of stealing market share from a competitor. I mean, it's, crypto adoption still at like 5% globally. So there's plenty to go around. Again, we just think that we can't speak for the market or competitors, but what I can say is that we think that our business model is correct, and the customer that we're looking for, we think will be attracted to what we have to offer versus what a competitor is.
Fantastic, Stephen. That is very nicely said. Well, let's go to a very quick break and then we'll come back and we'll finish off with the Crypto Conversation hot take round.
Whether you're an enterprise fund manager or a retail trader, buying and selling cryptocurrencies successfully requires price discovery you can rely on. Brave New Coin's liquid indices provide trusted US dollar prices for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple. Featuring end-of-day or intraday outputs, you can count on the BLX, ELX, and XRPLX for accurate US dollar pricing for smart contract oracles, settlement price discovery, net asset valuation, and performance analysis. Visit bravenewcoin.com to find out more.
All right, we're back, and I'm with Stephen Stonberg. Stephen is the COO and CFO at Bittrex Global. Stephen, I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do this. I just want your hot takes, your hot fire. Take your best shot. Here we go. Stephen, where do you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-coin opportunist spectrum?
Well, I come from a traditional financial services background, and I believe in diversified portfolios. So I would never put all of my eggs in one basket. So even if you're like super bullish on Bitcoin, you probably want to diversify across other asset classes in the space.
That makes sense, Stephen. A very sensible and diplomatic answer. I like it. Next question, Stephen. What would you say is your firmest conviction, crypto opinion?
So mine is a bit different. I'm very much on the sort of, I think there's two camps of crypto exchanges or operators. It's the sort of regulated crew who've adopted that, even if it limits your business short run. And there are the ones who've just decided to globally dominate, but completely ignore that regulatory environment exists. I think that, and to date, not all of them have had any repercussions from that. I think we're going to see increasing enforcement down the road, meaning the market for the good players who've invested in this type of thing is going to be broader.
Makes sense. I think you're probably right. Stephen, I ask every guest this question, and look, it is a little bit contentious, but who do you think wins the American presidential election 2020? I
have no strong view on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if Trump won. I don't think the Democrats have fielded a very strong candidate.
I think that's fair. Okay. I don't want to go too much further into that, though. Stephen, Bill Gates famously said, "We tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. What does the blockchain space look like in 10 years' time?
That's an interesting question. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. The one thing I've learned moving from the regular financial world into crypto is the whole idea of crypto time. And 1 year in crypto is like 5 years in financial services. So I think that if you have that paradigm, like 10 years is like 50 years in the real world. So I think it'll be completely different than what we have now. I couldn't predict more than a year or two in sort of what we're doing right now. But I think it will, for sure, have a much more dominant place in sort of mainstream applications everywhere in all sorts of the economy and society.
Well, Stephen, sci-fi author William Gibson said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
I'd say crypto. I mean, only 5% of the world's adopted it. So those of us who are deeply ingrained in this market, and for whom, in some ways, this whole Corona thing, like we already work in this very decentralized, remote fashion. So this is how this industry's already operated. I think we operate in some ways in a bit of a bubble, and we're not even, it's that classic thing where you don't know what you don't know, or you don't know what others don't know. And I think that we forget how much we take for granted, how much specific knowledge there is in this industry still, and how much education there is still to do. I think most of the world still doesn't even know what a Bitcoin really is.
That's right, but I think all going well, everyone is about to find out very soon.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's a horrible, Corona, and obviously this is a horrendous situation, but I think, it's interesting that a crisis is now causing people to rethink some of the things we've been sort of pointing out to them. Obviously central banks printing money and recency bias. And I think that this is so close to 2008, really people will start to take a look at alternative ways of storing their wealth.
That's right, and it reminds me of that old Lennon quote, which goes something like, there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are months when decades happen, and that's certainly the case in 2020, isn't it?
That's a great quote. I have not heard that one before. I'll definitely use that one. That's really good. I agree.
All right. Well, we're almost finished, Stephen, but let's zoom out. What do you see as the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
I'm fundamentally an optimist, so I think I see utopia, but even in our current environment, pre-corona, there still dystopia exists. There's North Korea, there's places where there is no freedom. So I don't think it'll be evenly distributed, but we'll hopefully, long term, I'm hoping that it won't be a dystopian future.
I'm with you, Stephen. I'm an optimist too. All right, well, let's finish this on an optimistic note. I close this out with this question for every guest, Stephen. Finally, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, show, or universe?
The Kubrick film. What is it called? The
2001: A Space Odyssey.
2001: A Space Odyssey. Absolutely, by far. The movie. It was just groundbreaking. I mean, if you look at it today, yes, you can't even believe how far ahead of their time. That was filmed in the 60s.
Yeah, absolutely. A visionary piece of sci-fi, and I think you're the first person to go for that on the Crypto Conversation. So yeah, happy about that, Stephen.
Okay.
Well, hey, it has been a lot of fun talking to you today, Stephen. Take us out. The microphone is yours. Please tell the people where they can find you on your various platforms and where they should go to find out more about Bittrex Global.
Well, they can join our Telegram chat group. They can go, obviously, the website. If you're outside of the US, it's just bittrex.com, and you'll be directed to the Bittrex Global website automatically. And we're on Twitter at Bittrex Global #2.
Fantastic. And of course, I'll put links to all of those in the show notes. Hey, thank you, Stephen. All the best.
Our pleasure. Thanks so much for having us today.
Okay, there you go. That was today's show. Thank you to Stephen Stonberg from Bittrex Global. Links, of course, are in the show notes to Stephen and to those platforms, and, of course, Bittrex Global. If you are looking to trade some altcoins on an exchange, they will help you out, I am sure. Thank you for listening. Today's episode of The Crypto Conversation was brought to you by BNC Pro, the new digital wealth platform featuring an all-in-one suite of customizable institutional-grade applications that help you manage your crypto investments. You can research, chart, screen, analyze, optimize, report, and more. BNC Pro is the ultimate portfolio tool for individual or enterprise use. Streamline your workflow, manage your crypto, and master this brave new asset class with BNC Pro. And of course, you can go to bnc-pro.com to create your free account. Link is also in the show notes to BNC Pro. And look, it really is a wonderful platform, so do suggest you check it out if you have not done so already. If you did enjoy the show, also please make sure you subscribe to the Crypto Conversation podcast and whatever podcast app you are using. And look, hey, go wild. Why not give us a review and a 5-star rating in Apple iTunes? All right, we're out of here. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin.